So Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a heavily persecuted man, okay? And the reason why, because he wrote a bunch of ideas down on paper. And he wrote a bunch of ideas that says, hey, we should change society, we should do things different, and people didn't like that. And it's really ridiculous. I mean, this is the 1700s, so this isn't like, back in the, I don't know, caveman days or Roman Empire days, just oppressive days. This is more the modern age. But these ideas had set about the French Revolution. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau, even though he died in 1778, 1 year before the revolutions would start, he was the spirit and soul of the French Revolution. And Ben Franklin, Tecumseh, I mean, these guys had been educated, but they were self-educated, and actually that's one of the things that I didn't even write down on this list. So there's actually 11 principles. There's self-education, right? Even though Tecumseh had no formal schooling, people would actually brag about how Tecumseh was a smart man. And, he knew the principles. He knew that, this is our land. You should not be on our land. He had fought for those rights and those beliefs. And I look at him today with a very sympathetic view. Because this wasn't, the European lands. Why couldn't there have been some integrationist, sort of share the land type policy? So self-education is actually the most powerful form of education. Isaac Asimov says actually self-education is the only form of, is the only way to actually educate yourself. So let's talk about Jean-Jacques Rousseau, okay? A lot of people say, oh, he was crazy. He was afraid he's going to get persecuted everywhere. He was persecuted everywhere he went, okay? So, let's see, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he considered himself a citizen of Geneva. Geneva's in Switzerland. So he was born in Geneva, Switzerland, but he didn't consider himself Swiss because Geneva at that time was a city-state. So they believed that it was their, its own independent republic. It was its own country, a city-state. Sort of like Louisville, right? Louisville's got its own morals and mores and ways that they do things. It's not consistent with how the rest of Kentucky does things, and that's actually true of most major cities because there's so many people that they have to have sort of their own rules to be able to govern that city effectively. So we had city-states, Geneva. Jean-Jacques Rousseau considered himself a citizen of Geneva, and it's a city-state. It had a Calvinist heritage, which I'm not. I think the Calvinist says that there are some chosen people. There's some people that it's predestined to go to hell, predestined to go to heaven. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he liked the Italian language better than the French language. He felt like it sounded more natural than the French language. So a lot of people say he was a Frenchman. He wrote a lot of his stuff in French, but he actually liked the Italian language better. He was born in Switzerland, in Geneva, and he always called himself a citizen of Geneva. So in 1762, Jean-Jacques Rousseau is going to write his most famous work, Emilia and the Social Contract. And I have a copy of Emilia right here. Right? It's E-M-I-L-E, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So you got Emilia, and then you also have the Social Contract. Now, I don't, actually I do, Social Contract. So you have Emilia and the Social Contract, which he wrote in 1762. His best works, both in the same year, and actually he would say Emilia is his most influential or the best. Basically, he consolidated his philosophy with Emilia because he has his ideas about the world, and he says we're born free, and then we're in chains. Society oppresses us, so we need to protect the goodness that is in each one of us when we were first born. Basically, just don't do harm to others. That's the first rule that you have to others. Do whatever you like. Just don't hurt others. And then you develop yourself to find out who you are, what you like, what your ambitions are, the things that you like to do. And then once you have a good, solid idea of who you are, then you have to be made to fit into civil society. And you have to have, you got to be productive, and you have to have some sort of service to others. You have to, be able to help others. So you have to first find out who you are, and then you have to take that wild person, and then you got to be able to mold them into something, into something society can use. But at first, you got to allow your humanness to be human. You have to be, allow yourself to be you. So that's his social contract theory. But Emilia was to consolidate those things. So how do you protect that child, the inherent goodness that they have? They're born free. They're born good. But eventually, the society corrupts them. So how do you make sure that goodness? And so he's like, mothers, protect your children. Build a fence around them. Protect their soul. Don't allow their soul to, don't be malleable. Some things that people say, like I'm taking this class about the middle school, and they're talking about being malleable or malleable. So like a aluminum foil, right? they say that the student has to be transparent. So that way when you look at the student, they are honest, they say everything that's on their mind, they're completely transparent, and that's a good thing. That's what you want them to be, so that way you can be able to mold them and guide them however you want to guide them. Well, that, those qualities aren't exactly the best qualities to have out in society. If a cop says, "Are you guilty?" and you say, "Yeah, I'm guilty," he's going to take you to jail. So, to be honest, to some people, it's not a very good idea. Very much, you probably should lie in that circumstance. Are you guilty? No, I didn't do it. Oh, okay, go on. Right? That's Curtis Stewart. I got robbed, and the cops went up to him, and they was like, "Oh, no, I didn't do it," and they didn't arrest him. Well, he did do it. I saw him with my own eyes, but it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. He had lied, and he got away with his crimes. So, yeah, you want honesty, and you want good people, but if you're around a bunch of fascist psychos that just want to ruin your life, that will never work. So, and then to be malleable, so like, every teacher of every class, they get to manipulate your behavior and make you how they want to make you, like as if they're the moral arbitrators, as if they're some sort of, God that can control everything and everybody. And actually, if you're controlling and manipulating, then I say you're the wicked person. You're the bad person. You're the one manipulating everybody. That's not a good thing. That's a horrible thing. Okay? So, that's, they're the judge, and they think that they are the final moral arbitrators, but actually they're the wicked, evil people who have no compassion or empathy for others, just like a psychopath. Serial killers, all serial killers are psychopaths, but not all psychopaths are serial killers. Some of them get jobs in the public education system, and they get paid for their their sickness. And it's a good thing in capitalism, right? Dog eat dog world. If I could fire everybody just to save a couple pennies, well, that makes me a good boss. I'm a good capitalist, right? I saved a few pennies. I ruined everybody's life that was underneath me, but for the company, for my shareholders, I'm a genius. And you need people to make those cutthroat decisions in order to make, to maximize your profits. Well, because of civilization and society, and because of chasing money in business, we don't talk about what's moral and what's right and ethics. All that basically takes a back burner to just making money, right? So basically, I see a lot of psychopaths. I see a lot of either bosses or obedient people, and they're doing whatever it is that they can do and get away with. That's what they're doing. They're doing anything and everything up until the point, of getting caught. Which we should have rational principles that we adhere to. We are logical thinking people, and we should have rational principles that we live by and adhere to. And of course that's true. Of course that's true. Okay, so Jean-Jacques Rousseau, carrying on, he wrote in 1762, Emilia and the Social Contract, right? Social Contract, a political treatise that says that man is born good, but society corrupts him. And then Emilia is an educational treatise that says, well, in order to protect that person's goodness, you got to make them a super individual to where their will won't be conquered by anyone else. So they have a strong enough will to block any of those manipulators and those psychopaths that want to manipulate your child. Another thing about the American education system, since that's all they're doing is teaching you to be manipulated. I was a straight-A student, valedictorian, right? The only thing that I learned by being valedictorian was that I was blindly obedient to arbitrary authority. And I wanted to become valedictorian so much that basically everybody else that I viewed was a competitor, and I just wanted to get better grades than anybody else, and that was my only main motivator, was to get the highest grades ever. And because I was, a kiss ass, and how can you respect somebody that just gets pushed around? I tried to be, smart aleck and make jokes and stuff, sort of try to be like a bad good kid or whatever, sort of in the middle. But basically all I got was a bunch of resentment from all my classmates. Gallatin County, ask any of them. The class of 2000 in Gallatin County was where I was valedictorian, but even though, the people was like, I was voted most likely to succeed, and I got all these awards and stuff, it was all an illusion just to keep on getting me to be obedient. Since I was being obedient, everybody else should be like me, so go along with it. I resent my education very much so. There's only like 3 or 4 activities, that I think was educational, but in terms, it was all dictatorship. Even there's some nice teachers, some benevolent teachers, and I had one teacher that allowed me to come up with my own educational program, and I excelled, beyond all comprehension, which proves that when you allow the student to design their own educational program, and then the teacher acts as the administrator to push that person along, that they will excel beyond your wildest dreams. So I had a class that was about to say that was the best teacher, best class I've ever had. But then that teacher turned around and automatically said, well, since I was nice to you then, now you got to be my, bitch-ass slave. You got to be my bitch-ass slave nigger. Get down on your knees, do this, pick this up, shut the hell up. And this person her own husband, it's Elizabeth Rogers from Spalding University, her own husband calls her a bitch. So again, she would never marry or be with somebody that she, that is compliant and obedient to her, only somebody that would be willing to stand up to her. Because you can't, how can you respect anybody? I heard Beyonce actually say something about that. If a man just did whatever I wanted him to do, I wouldn't respect him. I would not respect that man, because if he's just doing everything that I want him to do, he has no love and he doesn't know who himself actually is. So that's why Jean-Jacques Rousseau says you got to build up the child's will and who they are, so that way when they are being manipulated, if I choose to do what you want to do, right? If I don't know, if I was to, let's see, say I was in a protest and I wasn't giving a speech or whatever, but I wanted to show solidarity with my friends and they just wanted me to march, I would be obedient to the people who had directed that march, right? I would get in the march, I would shake my sign, I would make my go where I needed to go. So, you could choose to do it, but ultimately I'm still me, I'm still my own person, and I had chose to give that up temporarily, not, completely. I'm not a slave to a system or an institution. So that's Jean-Jacques Rousseau, okay? So he wrote these ideas in 1762. So this is just 200-something years ago. Still wildly revolutionary today, okay? So he was talking about the state of nature, right? They try to make the state of nature. He says that the uncorrupted morals prevail in the state of nature. He used the Caribbeans as an example of the noble savage. He was sitting there saying, well, go to Africa. If we're bad people, right, then how come, I don't know, he was talking about how the Africans and the Native Americans showed more kindness and decency to each other than what the colonizers did, right? The Pequot War, they just wiped everybody out. Christopher Columbus, he killed 500,000 Taino people. He even made fun of the Indians because they would give him all the treasures. Here's some gold, here's some trinkets. And then they were so naive, they grabbed his blade and actually cut his hand because they'd never seen, a sword before. So he's making fun of their naiveness and their gentleness, and their sort of cosmopolitan, egalitarian, qualities. But civilization, right, to go in there, wipe everybody out, killing people, take their land over, that's okay. That's civilized. That's acceptable. No, Kentucky is a civilization living upon an ancient civilization of which we made no improvement over. So he points out the Caribbeans because he says, he never used the term noble savage, but I think it's a good term to actually say what he's talking about. So he says the noble savage, right? So not every, when you're born you have all qualities, so you can turn bad if you want to. But he's saying initially, when left to yourself, when left to the state of nature, we will be isolated by ourselves, only need to do what we need to do, and we won't go around hurting everybody. Whereas Hobbes said we would be in a state of war against everybody murdering everybody, and it would just be insane. So what you need to stop people from killing everybody and having these poor, solitary, brutish, short existence, you need a Leviathan, a strong state, to be able to protect everybody, so that way people can be free and do what they want to do. I do believe there's a combination of security and freedom that the person needs to have, but ultimately we're all free, so society should protect that individual autonomy and protect that sovereignty of each individual person. So really, democracy and respecting that sovereignty are two of the guiding principles that we should have when we write the Constitution for the postmodern school of for the revolutionaries. Okay, so let's keep on going to Rousseau. He's pointing out he praised the admirable moderation. So the Caribbeans, right, they're running around naked or just in loincloths, and he says that he praised their moderation because even though they have a sexual urge, and especially in the hot climate that seems to inflame the passions, the Caribbeans aren't going around raping and just hurting everybody. In fact, they were moderate. So even though they were naked and they're in a hot climate, there wasn't all this, horrible crimes that was going on. There's still respect for one another, and he praised in moderation. So these are, savages, according to Christopher Columbus, since that's where he landed in Haiti, Cuba, and Barbados, or San Salvador, right? San Salvador. And that was the first island so he landed in the Caribbean. He never actually made it to America, just in the Caribbean. But in the Caribbean, you have these supposed savages that are actually showing more respect to each other, even though they're naked and in a hot climate. So he showed, he admired their moderation. Rousseau wrote that morality was not a societal construct, but rather natural in the sense of being innate, and an outgrowth from man's instinctive disinclination to witness suffering, from which arise the emotions of compassion or empathy. So we don't like to hurt others because we don't want to hurt ourselves. We don't like what the person's face looks like, right? We empathize with others. Yeah, we have anger and brutality within, everybody's got a good wolf and a bad wolf, but you feed the good wolf, and ultimately, the noble savage chooses goodness over evil. Instead of going around hurting people, they were isolated by themselves, they were self-sufficient, and they did no harm to other people. So, they're only good in a negative sense insofar they're self-sufficient, not subject to the vices of political society. So society wasn't able to corrupt them, therefore they weren't the bad people. When you start getting government, you start getting, the political society sort of coming in, that's when you get all this type of corruption. So Rousseau's natural man is virtually identical to a solitary chimpanzee or an ape, such as orangutan is described by Buffon, I guess that's a man's name. The natural goodness of humanity is thus the goodness of an animal, which is neither good nor bad. Rousseau says that our souls become corrupt as science and technology progresses. So, we have civilization, which is supposed to make everything better, but actually, if you don't have morals, right, that's even Teddy Roosevelt, if you teach people without teaching morals and ethics, then you just teach a savage wild beast to do as they want to do to anybody who they want to do. But it's odd that Teddy Roosevelt would say that, since he was, he was for bloody imperialism war. So savages were actually civilized, and the civilized were savage. This is according to Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And so civilization hasn't advanced human progress, and in fact, it took it down. So Emile or on education. Rousseau urged that young people be given freedom to enjoy their life, to enjoy sunlight, exercise, and play. He recognized that there are different periods, and actually the Reggio Emilia tradition says they recognize play as a very important creative learning tool, because when you play, you're engaged, you see what's going on, and the rule, you want to win, right? So you're actually involved, you're engaged as much as you can be engaged in it. So there are different periods of development in a child's life. He argued that children's learning should be scheduled to coincide with them. A child should be allowed to grow up in this fashion will achieve the best possible development. Education should begin in the home. Parents should not preach to their children, but should set a good example. Rousseau believed that children should make their own decisions. Emile de l'éducation and du contract social, the French terms for the social contract, and Emile, they were both burned by the authorities in Geneva. His books were banned in several countries. So here you have this man that's just saying, hey, we should be free, right? The noble savage, the people that was here before us were actually good, and original man, our human nature was a good thing, and where you're not allowing our natural goodness to breathe free. Even in Emilia, he talks about how you're wrapped up in swaddling clothing, so you're free, in the womb to stretch and do all these other things, and you get out the womb, and then they wrap you up real tight, like as if you was in some sort of, mental vest, right? Some sort of a crazy straitjacket, right? A crazy straitjacket. So he was like, what has the baby done to actually help their situation? Being born has actually hurt their situation of being free. They were free at first, and now they're not free at all. So when he wrote the book in 1762, Geneva, the authorities in Geneva had burned his book, right? The authorities condemned it, they confiscated the books, and then they had destroyed it. Hello? Yeah, who's this? Man, I ain't trying to deal with this. Okay, so you have Emile. Alright, let's carry on. So, Heretical Education Reform Treatise, Social Contract, and Emile. Two works caused uproar amongst the French Catholics and the Calvinist censors. So they got a Calvinist tradition and the French Catholics, right? So again, you got the Catholics. The Catholics are going to kill Francisco Ferri-Guardia too, okay? The other guy that I'm going to be talking about. So Emile, there's a Heretical Education Reform Treatise, Social Contract, and Emile, two works caused the uproar among the French Catholics, right? You're a heretic. How dare you say man was born free? The Catholic Church doesn't agree with you, so therefore, you're like Galileo, we don't agree with your science, so, get the hell out of here. And they try to, Catholics are about excommunication, so they try to sort of shame people into conformity. So they were deeply offended, and they publicly burnt the books. Orders for his arrest were issued. Emile was condemned, officially disapproved of by Paris Parliament, the governing body, and heavily criticized by the Archbishop of Paris. So the Archbishop, the Catholics, then there was a court system, not the legislature of Paris Parliament. Well, I don't know, the Parliament, that's the legislature, but they had condemned it. Then they burned his books by the authorities in Geneva, Switzerland. In Paris, as in Geneva, they ordered the books to be burned. So they're burning it in Paris, they're burning it in Geneva. And the author they wanted the author arrested. So they burned his books, they condemned it, they confiscated everybody's books, Paris and Geneva, and then they said, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, you should be arrested for writing these books. Now, this does have a connection to a modern-day America. Eugene Debs spoke out against World War I, and he was put into prison he was condemned to be put into prison for 10 years. I think they got him out at 5, and then he goes to a sanitarium, and then eventually he dies. Ronnie Lee Smith, he was put into prison, and then his leukemia cancer cuts his back up, and then he dies. So when these authorities catch you and throw you in cancer, or throw you into jail, the plan of the oppressor is a sadistic love. It's a love of death. That's Paulo Freire, and that's sort of the black schools too. That's bell hooks. But they want to kill you, okay? They want to take away your freedom and manipulate you. And the reason why they want to take away your freedom and manipulate you, because they want you to just be a tool. But if you take away my freedom, then you're taking away my soul, and you're taking away my humanity and my ability to make my own choices. And there is no moral decision when I'm just being obedient. When I'm being blindly obedient, I'm just doing as I'm told. And there's no moral basis to just doing as you're told. You know, at no time when the Nazis, right? This is Adolf Hitler. The genocide, war, and slavery, the worst atrocities in all of human history come about because of blind obedience to arbitrary authority. You have the Stanford prison experiments. The college kids dress up like prisoners and prison guards, and then within a few days, the prison guards were torturing the hell out of the prisoners. There was one guy that tried to lead a hunger strike. One guy who was making sense and actually knew what was going on. And if they had it's an experiment, right? It's a college experiment. They can't abuse and be torturous and stuff. But the prisoners, the college students, are so obedient that they were yelling at the one guy trying to have a hunger strike, saying, just shut up and get in line and do as you're told, right? And the prison guard, actually, he would later on say he was actually trying to push them as far as they could just to see if they would break or see if they would actually do everything that they were supposed to do. It's an experiment, so he put on his role, he put on his hat, and he, played by the rules or whatever as strong as he could. So, human beings have a strong penchant for being obedient and complacent. And this is Howard Zinn. He's talked about the greatest atrocities in American history, slavery, war, genocide, are because of blind obedience to authority. Just do as you're told, right? And I remember one of the Karen Dunnigan, she had told me at Spalding University, this is a teacher training school, so-called normal school. They call it normal because they normalize the oppression. She had said, well, there's nothing we can do about the war, so let's not even talk about it, right? And then they were in favor of burning Anne Frank's book. There's some passages in Anne Frank's book that this class had said that they were against, and I felt, though, she had died at a young age, so whatever she had wrote in her diary is what she wanted the world to read. And if my son or my daughter read up to page 300 and saw the, controversial passages of Anne Frank, I would not hate them. I would not think they were dirty, disgusting people, but that's sort of what they were trying to say to me. So, of course, the oppressors of the classrooms are going to say, well, there's nothing we can do about the war, so let's not even talk about it or discuss it. Well, not talking about it or discussing it, that'll never bring change happening that way. But when we do talk about it, the oppressors are the reason why that there is war, slavery, and genocide. That's the reason why we have these types of things. Now, I think I'm going to cut this short again. I'm still in the middle of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He gets persecuted, and then eventually he's like all scared about being persecuted at the end of his life, and then people try to say, he's crazy, No, he's getting persecuted by his own people in Geneva, right? He writes his book, and it's about advancing human society and about, keeping man who is born free and good, maintaining that freedom and that goodness. And because he wants to maintain that freedom and goodness, you have the French Catholics and the Calvinist censors in Geneva, in Paris, who just want to oppress him. They just want to oppress him. They want to knock him down. And so he goes into exile and he runs away. So in Paris, as in Geneva, they ordered the books to be burned and the author arrested. So they have a warrant out for his arrest. All the Marechal or Marechal de Luxembourg could do was to provide a carriage for Rousseau to escape from France. After formally renouncing his Genevan citizenship in 1763, Rousseau became a fugitive, spending the rest of his life moving from one refuge to another. So that's how he ended his life, very much like Ronnie Lee Smith. Right? The authorities tried to say he had committed a crime, which, the crime that they said he committed, it had nothing to do with all he got 3 felonies, for trying to break his cousin out of the hospital. The hospital was holding him because they said that she was suicidal. She said that she wasn't. She had an epileptic seizure, and that's how she had cut herself. She didn't want to be in the hospital, so he tried to save her. And because supposedly he had broke a door, and they tried to say other things, he didn't actually get her out of the hospital, so there's no way they could have said kidnapping or anything like that. But because of that incident, they put 3 felonies on him, and he fled. He took off. He wasn't going to report to jail for, you convicted me of 3 felonies? That is not a felony. Meanwhile, Boone County has a police officer that just killed a girl in cold blood, right? So you got Ronnie Lee Smith who goes to the hospital to save a cousin, a female, and then you got a Boone County police officer that just murders a 19-year-old girl in cold blood, and that almost seems like he's going to get away with it. So you have somebody who saves a girl gets 3 felonies, and you got someone who murders a girl and he gets no charges whatsoever. So hopefully they'll come to their mind and actually do what's right in that circumstance. And I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to keep on saying what the Jean-Jacques Rousseau, all the abuse and persecution that he had endured coming up. So this is the Postmodern University for Revolutionaries 2. These are the principles, right? The top 11. Actually, I've changed it to 11 principles or alternatives to the current education system.